Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cinema Savvy. It's myself, George, joined once more by Tayte for a spoiler discussion on another Marvel series. I almost hesitated on series then. Yeah, we now have series and we have films, and this is the sixth Marvel show in just over a year and 2 months or something. How are we doing this? We're recording it in the morning, but this is going on Sunday. How are we doing today?
Well, funnily enough, this is really funny. I was actually caught off guard by the Marvel intro we put on there because I completely forgot this was a Marvel project. It's so disconnected from the rest of Marvel that as soon as I was like, oh yeah, it was Marvel, wasn't it? Like watching every single week because I feel like this is the first kind of like non-connected Marvel thing we've had in a very long time where you can't tie it into anything else at all. So it's very interesting. I can't wait to kind of discuss it and everything like that. But before we do that, socials?
Absolutely. So everyone, please comment your thoughts on Moon Knight. As we said, the series is out now. It's on Disney Plus. You can watch all 6 episodes. Comment all of your thoughts on that. Hit the subscribe button. I want to say there's a lot more Marvel stuff on the way. We've actually had a pretty intense week of Marvel stuff. We've had the Doctor Strange spoiler discussion, which we're recording the morning after. That was a lot of fun. Really good to get some people on there. So if you've seen the new film, do check that out. There's a spoiler-free review from the week before. And Marvel's not going away. We're going to have Thor. We're going to have Miss Marvel, a wrap-up when that's done. And I think there's some more films this year. There's a lot of Marvel stuff happening, but we get a break. We get a break for a month. So hit that subscribe button. More Marvel stuff down the line. But the big thing at the moment is the Star Wars. But Tate, where can the people find us about these videos?
The people can find us on our usual socials. So that is at cinema_savvy on Twitter. On Facebook, it is just type in Cinema Savvy. You'll see the link down in the description as well. And also go on to letterboxd.com/CinemaSavvy to keep track of all the films that we've been watching. And finally, go into the description to pick up some t-shirts or jumpers as well. I'm not wearing mine today because it's really hot here in the UK. So
yeah, it's I've got the shirt out because I need to do some ironing on the nice tops to wear when it's hot because it's been a really hot few weeks. But that being said, as I said, we're talking. I'm glad you brought up the non-reference thing. If I'm right, I think there's only 2 references to the entire MCU, and calling it a reference is a push, which is a really good thing because just thoughts going into this series for both of us. For me, I was very curious. I mean, I love Oscar Isaac. I think he's one of the best working actors today. I think he's an actor that can really embrace his roles. And I think he's always committed to them, even if the project doesn't work out. Looking at you, X-Men Apocalypse. I think he's somebody that, the fact he wants to still do another Marvel. I mean, he's playing Spider-Man 2099 as well. So this is the 3rd comic book role, I guess. But Oscar Isaac being in this was the selling point for me. A character I knew nothing about. I didn't know anything about Moon Knight before this show was announced, before I knew I'd seen anything. I just knew that this is apparently, quote, a darker Marvel character. And I just wanted a bit of a change. Like, when I approached this series...
Hawkeye. Yeah. Everyone forgot about Hawkeye.
I really enjoyed Hawkeye. I think Hawkeye is so contextual with the Christmas thing. You just forget it being Marvel.
Yeah.
But to me, like the TV shows, I think WandaVision, Hawkeye, the rest to me were very average, if that. And Moon Knight was the one. I was like, okay, we might get something meaty. We might get a drama. They've not got action directors involved. This seems like it's going to have a different feel to it. And I went in quite open to the series as a whole. I know a lot of reviewers got given the first 4 episodes, which is quite big, given it's a 6-episode series. Obviously, we didn't get these, and I'd heard very interesting stuff. But to me, I was curious more so than hyped.
Yeah, I was curious as well. So I knew only one thing about Moon Knight, which was the meme of the kind of random bullshit go meme.
Rather than throwing.
Yeah. That's the only thing I knew about this character at all. And I think that's where a lot of people were coming from as well. And Marvel does a very good job of kind of fleshing out these characters who are either lesser known or not really known outside of people who are dedicated to the comics. Like they did that with Guardians of the Galaxy very well. Not many people knew about Guardians of the Galaxy other than those who were committed to Marvel before they kind of announced it was going to be a film and it became more popular and everything like that. But with Moon Knight, it's even more niche than that, I want to say. And it was going to be very interesting because he does have context within the larger kind of Marvel canon and the comics and stuff like that. But this series, I think they said pretty much from the off that it was going to be very, very independent and they weren't going to rely on kind of tying it into kind of it. I think they always mentioned it was going to be like a limited series or it was either going to be like separate on its own and stuff like that. And there was some confusion towards the end with the whole kind of, is it going to be series 1 or is it going to be season, like that whole thing, like towards the end. So in the end, I guess it was completely independent of itself. I know there's been a lot of chatter about whether there's going to be a series 2 or not. I think it's in quite popular demand that there would be a series 2, but a lot of people are saying nope, there won't be, and stuff like that. It's interesting with that kind of side of things and everything like that.
Yeah, and I think this is the thing with Marvel, that without sort of dissing on them, like, I mean, I guess not a spoiler for Doctor Strange, but Doctor Strange isn't bloated. Like, it doesn't set up 100 films, it doesn't bring in 100 characters. And I feel that if you look at Phase 4 so far, Marvel haven't actually gone about the world building in terms of the setup X, Y, and Z. Now, we know it's all going to kick in and happen at some point, but so far, like, Hawkeye was quite isolated. This is quite isolated. Obviously, What If was, it's a what if concept, and a lot of the stuff has actually been very low key. There's no been saving the world. Pretty much, it's been interesting, the phase at the moment, and I just think they need to not change it up. But when you have something like Endgame, where you've merged everything, you've saved the universe, you've lost half the universe, you just need to change the pace, change the style, do something different. And I feel like we're getting that ever so slowly. And I guess it's a really good point to actually start with. I mean, the main character, the main characters, the plurals, Oscar Isaac in this role, absolutely superb. Now, we spoke how much that we enjoyed him. I know we spoke up before, but he plays 3 roles in this. We have Mark Spector, the American, Stephen Grant, obviously the British one, and Jake Lockley, who we get at the end. Now, it's really hard to wrap up. So I guess an approach we're going to say, we're not doing this episode by episode. We're sort of talking about the series as a whole, the whole thing's out. I would actually suggest this is probably much better viewing as a 6 episode together rather than the stagnated weekly things. That's what I personally think.
Yeah, some of the Marvel shows so far have been like better if you watch them weekly and stuff like that. I know people the first time around when we had WandaVision were getting kind of like part of people were getting frustrated with the please stand by and stuff like that. The other half of the people were going, "Oh, cliffhanger, please stand by, no!" Just like give me more and stuff like that. Whereas with this series, I don't feel like the cliffhangers felt as big. No. But if we're talking about just Oscar Isaac's performance just in general, phenomenal. Probably the best so far out of any of the TV shows, and maybe that is because it is solely independent, solely focused on this character and stuff like that. And he has to kind of switch between the different characters so frequently during this series that, like, even acting alongside himself, we've seen it happen before with some actors being able to act alongside themselves, whether it's kind of like CGI or whether it's kind of them being able to do it. Some people can do it, like Armie Hammer in Social Network. Some people can't, like Will Smith in that Will Smith film that I can't remember the name of.
The aging one.
Yeah,
that's the one.
But with this, it's so amazing, especially as it gets later on through the series, and they don't have the clean cuts between him switching personality, where he is literally able to have conversations with himself, changing his accent, changing his mannerisms, changing everything about him, just in the middle of a scene without even having that cut. Just that kind of that mental knowledge of him switching personalities and stuff like that is really, really well done. And like you said before, he is such a big actor nowadays. Like, he's doing so much stuff. I just looked through kind of what's coming up for him and stuff like that. I didn't even realize he's going to be playing Solid Snake in a Metal Gear Solid film. That's going to be fantastic. Like, I can't wait for that. But he's also kind of going to be like doing more stuff with the Spider-Verse and voice acting and stuff like that. There's so much stuff that he's done, and there's so much stuff
he doesn't stop.
No, he doesn't.
And I think what's quite rare now is you don't get many actors that do TV and film. I know it's a bit backwards maybe, but he did last year that series with Jessica Chastain. I forgot the name of it, but it's like it's like a struggling couple, and he'll just drop these amongst his big scenes from marriage. That's it. And he's so versatile, and he just seems like he never stops working, but also like he's such a good actor. And I think what's fascinating with Oscar Isaac is that sort of getting into a Star Wars discussion. He's somebody that is more than happy to jump in franchises, be a part of them. But at the same time, he picks choices best for the acting. And you got to think, like, for an actor, it must be so exciting to get offered this role. Right, okay, one side of it, someone will say it's a comic book, it's a superhero, it's this, you've done it before. But then, like, you're playing someone with dissociative identity disorder. And you're going to get to play, like, mainly 2 different personalities. And I think the beauty of this series, is almost how it's been staged. That you begin with Stephen Grant. We're introduced to Stephen Grant, and then we learn quickly that Mark Spector's the alter ego. And then the ultimate twist is as the series develops, actually, Stephen Grant is the not alter ego, but he is, it was always Mark Spector.
Yeah.
Stephen Grant was the traumatic coping mechanism. I know that's episode 5, but the way in which they wrote the series to lead up to that episode, I think, was superb. And again, this goes down to I don't think it worked because it was spread out across 6 weeks. I think it worked because the writing was so on point. His performance was so good. And when you get to that reveal of what happened, that was like, you could like pinpoint. You can take Marvel off this for that episode. That is just looking at somebody with a disorder and seeing what trauma can do to a person. And it was so well done. And I just think as well, like, he had such, probably not a fun time, but Stephen Grant's fascinating because we're English. So when we first heard that voice, I think everyone in England was taking the piss. Was it the trailer?
I mean,
when it's like my waking nights, like it's like it's funny, but when you get to the development down the line, you realise that he is impersonating a British actor on a film he has grown up with.
I'll go ahead and say it about the accent, because the accent was a big thing. Kind of some people saying, like, oh, it's not a very good accent. Some people, I actually think it's quite a good accent. Like,
I like it. Yeah, I like it.
If I'd heard that accent, and you'll laugh at this, because if I was to pinpoint, if someone said, tell me exactly that personality from that accent, I'd immediately go Spurs supporter. I'd go London and all that kind of stuff.
It's like, it's like northeast London. Like, it's not quite Cockney, but it's like that weird pitch
like this. It's like, it's really funny because some people are going, oh, that's just a terrible stereotypical English accent. No. I know people who speak like this. I know you get the whole kind of like people going full on Cockney or people going full on Queen's English. Somewhere in the middle there, you've got like the accent that was done here. And he could easily blend in, like, if in London, he would easily blend in and stuff like that.
It was the facial expressions and everything as well. Like, it's how he played Stephen. Yeah, like, and I think it's quite sad, but he said he modelled him off Carl Pilkington.
Yeah.
He was saying, like, and it's mad that Oscar Isaac watches An Idiot Abroad. Like, he actually said that in his interviews. And I think what I appreciate is that it's, as you said, it's not doing Queen's thing. It's not being so overly British, or, I mean, they're not even going to try like a Northern Georgia or anything, but we haven't really had that accent on TV. And I think the way it tied into the series as well, just off the fact it was him taking the persona of a fictional character in his TV thing. I loved that dynamic with it. I think it made it so much more interesting. And as you said earlier, like, the beauty of it is Oscar Isaac, like, can just change that facial expression. Yeah. And when he like merges, it's not like they make a sound effect, but you see like his face change on the spot into the correct accents. Not accents, sorry, the characters.
Yeah.
And I think that's not an easy feat for any actor to do. And he does it so seamlessly. And to the credit of the show, they don't do it until, I want to say, episode 4. Like, normally it will cut away, you'll have a moment. But when it reaches the point where you're familiar with it being two personas, you get the complete different thoughts. And
the first time I noticed it was the stars scene where Contry says he remembers every night and he can change night sky and stuff like that. And it's just a subtle change of them kind of agreeing that they're going to work together and switch over. And it is Mark Spector. And then suddenly Stephen comes up and you don't even see his face, but you just hear the accent change on the spot and you know there's no cut there and it's the first time. And you're like, that's really good. Like, that he's able to switch between that so quickly and stuff like that. But he does it in later episodes where you can see the face change immediately. You can see the expressions change. You can see the mood almost change. And they don't even need to use music to enhance that change or anything like that during this series. It's all purely kind of Oscar Isaac's performance. And it's fantastic because of that.
Yeah. And I think with that as well, when you get to episode 5, when we get the two characters together, that's amazing, because you would think it's them using like a twin or something, but that is Oscar Isaac playing two completely different characters who are the same character. And I just think the whole setup of episode 5, having them together, waking up together, acting with one another, it was so well done. And I think this sounds really unfair on Marvel, but like, it felt at times above a Marvel series. Like, when you get to the finale,
I mean,
when you
once
get
again,
the
I
giant
don't
god
think it
fight.
felt like a Marvel series at all. I
No,
mean, we
to
get
me, it didn't until you had to get the giant CGI god fighting CGI god, and I like, and I think when I watched the finale last night, because when we did Doctor Strange, I said I hadn't seen it. The finale left me a bit cold. I think because episode 5 to me was so good, and when I say good, I'm talking that if Oscar Isaac doesn't have an Emmy nomination for this series, because he will, they will submit episode 5 for that nomination. And I'm not to say he'll win it. It's a miniseries. They won't let a Marvel thing win it. But Oscar Isaac will be in the conversation for awards for Moon Knight. I just think the finale, it wasn't as interesting. There's some things that did work. Obviously, we get the stuff with Layla as well. But I just think because episode 5 to me was so fantastic, that felt more like the finale to me, if I'm being honest. That felt like the character development finale. Which obviously, it works as a finale in terms of what you need and what you expect, etc. And again, you get that credit scene. And, me and you kind of spoke for a bit live. The credit scene shouldn't be a credit scene. That's such an important scene for his character, for the tying up an arc of Arthur, which is Ethan Hawke. That should have really been just the final scene. Like, this is why it's into the credits. They probably know no one's actually going to skip it. But they could have easily just kept that in.
Yeah, and we were discussing this on the Doctor Strange thing yesterday. Like, it's the Marvel end credit scenes. They've been misusing them recently. They've been using them as like an extra scene where it could be involved in the film, and you could just have it as like a small tease or something. I feel like they're still misusing them for the end credit scenes and stuff like that. And that's the perfect example of one.
Scene. That is very, very. I mean, Jake Lockley. Like, for those not familiar, like, I mean, I said I'm not familiar with the comics, but everyone who's seen this knew there's a third persona. And you did a little bit of research.
They've been teasing it from like episode 4.
To the point where even in the finale we get the moment with the axe where he blacks out and like, who's done all of this? What did you do? And you're there like, but okay.
You also have that in the was it the Cairo scene or one of the scenes in episode 3 or something like that where everyone's like, I have no idea what just happened. Yeah,
and I'm absolutely fine for it. And again, if there's a second season, maybe they'll get more development. But the reveal of it was very cool. It was a very cool scene. But it felt too important to be chucked at the end of a credit scene. You didn't need a credit scene. Like, if this is a one and done series, that might work in its favor. But I just think that's such an important moment. And it's like, it's that sort of like black comedy as well. Like, he's actually never left me because I've actually got a third person who's still controlling them all.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. But do we want to talk about some of the characters very quickly? I mean,
sure. So
let's talk Layla.
Yeah.
Because May Kalamawe has had a lot of praise for the series. She's not been in many episodes. And obviously at the end of the series, she becomes the Scarlet Scarab. That's the official character title. I really enjoyed her in this. And I think one thing I want to say, something that I think a lot of people spoke about as well, with this series sort of residing in, like Egyptian, ancient Egypt philosophy, being in Egypt so much, the representation, like Marvel's always struggled with. But the fact that she has Egyptian heritage, the actress, which I think is very important. And I think it's really interesting just seeing her. And there's a few people, I'm going to shout out Streamer, the streaming site. They're doing an interview with the director the next week or so. It's very interesting seeing how people have responded to her, because obviously when you know nothing about the comics, you don't know the importance of that. But how many modern day films and series would just have a typical, here's a white actress or anything. But the fact this film is is very on point. Even like director Mohamed Diab, again, he's Egyptian as well.
Yeah.
Representation of Egypt as a country. There's no ridiculous skylines of it being bright orange like every other film that tends to be set in Egypt. This series are really good at that representation. But I just want to say I thought Layla was great in this. We didn't get too much from her, but I liked her setup with the intrigue that she was married to one of the personalities. And I guess, where the series ends with her, if they do get a second one, she'll get a bit more development. But I liked what I saw from her.
Yeah, I liked what I saw from her as well, because it's the other kind of character trope that you could sometimes see this kind of character fall into, being the damsel in distress, and she was never in distress at any point in this series. She was, if anything, taking command and taking charge. There was all that kind of like, I wouldn't say negotiating, but between her and Khonshu possibly wanting her and stuff like that. And I know the end credit scene kind of, he says, I never wanted her and stuff like that, but it's clear that it was a possible option if he was to lose kind of Mark as his avatar and stuff like that. But no, May Kalamawe, she was fantastic, like brilliant, really, really, really good, and it's really good to see that representation as well. Like you said, I can't wait to see more of her. And even if this is a limited series and stuff like that, because Moon Knight does have context within Marvel, we are hoping, and we've got Blade coming out as well, and stuff like that. We've got Black Knight. We're hoping for a team up of kind of darker Marvel characters at some stage with Daredevil as well.
Midnight Suns. Midnight Suns, I believe, is the name. I think the lineup for that is, I mean, I think Doctor Strange is
Daredevil, Black Knight, Blade, Moon Knight. There's one
a few
more,
others.
Is Ghost Rider in there?
I think it varies. I think it can be, but it is going to be that. Not that I hate using the term darker, but the slightly more adult series. I'm not going to say it'd be rated 18 or anything like that, but
yeah,
I think Marvel's moving the television. I mean, we're getting Echo series, which is actually just going to be Daredevil starring Kingpin with Echo.
Yeah,
but I think Marvel's going to be building into something else, which I'm fine with, because again, not everything has to be connected. You can do TV universes and connect 4 or 5 shows. You can do films.
I mean, ever since Disney kind of acquired Marvel and stuff like that, all of the films, I mean, Doctor Strange, like if you want to, we're not going to spoil anything from Doctor Strange here, but it is quite a brutal film, the new one in Multiverse of Madness and stuff like that. So they are starting to push the boundaries and move towards a darker edge, because they know that there is an audience out there for that. And they know with the TV, they can just say, okay, here are our darker shows, and push like the original series of Daredevil that they did, the Jessica Joneses, all of those kind of Netflix series, which took a darker tone. They could push those there. They could push Moon Knight there almost, because a lot of the stuff in this series did have a bit of a darker tone to it as well. You've basically got a war criminal who basically goes out and massacres people, who's being controlled by an Egyptian god, and a lot of the scenes are quite brutal because of that. I know they cut away from some of the violence, you just see the aftermath of it, but even then, it's like bloodied fists and stuff like that, especially in was it episode 1, where you see that it's like straight from the start, you've got that kind of thing. And dealing with mental health disorders as well is quite a heavy subject to deal with. Like they're pushing more towards the boundary of going a little bit darker, and especially after acquiring 20th Century Fox and getting characters like Daredevil and the X-Men who have gone to darker places as well, you can start to lean more towards that. You can have your friendly kind of main Marvel thing and stuff like that, and then you can have this side gig, which even looking from the poster, you can tell it's going to be a darker series kind of straight away. But that's kind of set up immediately from the opening scene with Ethan Hawke's character of Arthur, because like Arthur Harrow, opening scene, him walking with the glass sandals, like the glass in the sandals, that's really dark for an opening scene. Like a person putting glass in their sandals and just walking through the paint. It's really, really weird. And I think it kind of got me immediately on board with this, like the series, because I was immediately pulled into, like, is this guy unhinged or what's going on, like straight away? And seeing the villain as the opening scene before you see anything else is also quite a good way to introduce it.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that was the opening scene of the entire show, it wasn't this big superhero moment, none of this. It was the villain, it was just him walking. And it's so interesting because Ethan Hawke, I mean, I've still not seen Gattaca. I know I should have at this point.
You really should have seen Gattaca at this point.
And Ethan Hawke, I feel, is a really, I don't want to say underappreciated actor. Like, I feel quite new to his work, which is really unfair because his career is unbelievable. He's done so much theatre work, writing, acting, and films. And I think the best thing I saw, there was an interview with him, I can't remember, it might have been BBC, when they said, interviewing Ethan Hawke for a minute, and they said, no one ever thought we'd ever see you, Ethan Hawke, in the MCU. What happened? And they didn't mean it as a criticism. They meant it as like, how did this happen? And it's really worth speaking into that with Ethan Hawke, because he spoke so much about Mohamed Diab, saying that he wanted to work with him after seeing some of his films. And he was approached about the role, and he was really interested in it. And then he took it on for that. And I think he's one of the more interesting characters because he's almost like a cult leader. I mean, he's a cult leader. Obviously, he's representing the God Amit. But he has a very interesting performance where he never once overdoes it. at a certain point of the show, it feels very like, still, I'm wondering, how did Ethan Hawke do this? Anyone could have done this. And then when you get to the therapy stuff and you get him as the doctor or whatever, I think he's in the basement with Nurse Ratched. That's the moment, and you think that's why this actor's probably took this role, and because you're going to get this massive revelation that he's actually the psychiatrist doing all of the studies on him, and he was so good at doing that, and it was so different to his obviously walking with the cane type stuff, and again like that must be exciting for the actor as well, for him to get offered these differing roles. And I think the whole concept of ancient Egypt is something that we don't really get covered much, certainly in Western media. I think our fascination over here has always been like the Greek gods, and obviously, thanks to Thor, I guess Norse mythology is probably the biggest it's ever been in terms of media, not obviously real stuff. And it was really cool to learn more about them. But I just think Ethan Hawke for this was really good. I enjoyed him in the show. He was what it needed, something different, a counterpart. And listen, when you got Oscar Isaac in a role, get yourself a good actor to go with him. You don't want Oscar Isaac facing off against someone that isn't worthy of acting with him. And I just think, hey, teasing a video we've got tomorrow, maybe Ethan Hawke's name's going to get mentioned again. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with him in the show, and I just think it didn't need to be. I mean, he isn't the main villain. He doesn't become a god. He doesn't become a CGI monster. He's not involved in the fighting. And actually, his final moment, well, his penultimate final moment, I guess you could say, it's a blackout. They black out, and that's his arc done until the credit scene. So I think he's a really interesting character, and I think he was unbelievable in this. I really need to see the Beyond trilogy as well. That's the one everyone always tells me about.
Yeah, that's another one. I've only seen the first one. I haven't actually watched through them, but I do need to go back through and watch those. Maybe we'll do a short retrospective on them at some stage. But no, Ethan Hawke, just to start off with, he's playing a cult leader here, basically, based around kind of ancient Egyptian mythology, which is just a fantastic role to have in the first place, to have as a villain. And I think that's possibly why he took on this role, because it wasn't you're in a superhero film, we need you to play the villain. Immediately you'd think, okay, massive superpowers and stuff like that. But no, this villain is the kind of person who just talks. That's all he does. And he convinces or he judges you based on your actions. He's a very calm persona. And I saw something today on Reddit, which was all about I think it was on a Dungeons and Dragons subreddit and stuff like that. But they were talking about kind of how polite your villain should be and how evil they should be. And the more polite they are, the more evil they should be. Yeah. And this villain is polite. This villain is very he's willing to talk over things first. He's willing to negotiate. He's very calm. You never see him angry. He's very controlled, and you can tell from kind of when he was with Khonshu that he really was tortured by kind of being his avatar and stuff like that, by the actions that he did. And he's trying to find a solution to that he can find peace with. And having that as a villain's motivations is really fascinating, because of course he is very villainous. He is killing people, but at least you can see his side of things slightly and see, well, he's killing people. He killed people before under Khonshu, and Khonshu was killing people himself. So none of them are good people in the grand scheme of things. None of them are. And it's kind of Arthur Harrow's journey throughout this entire series is that he's very determined to kind of put an end to the pain and suffering that he went through. But in doing so, he's willing to inflict pain and suffering onto other people and accept the consequences. And it's a fascinating journey that he's taken on. I think Ethan Hawke, I can't really think of any other actor who could have filled that role in the same way that he did, now that I've seen that role. And a character's done well if he does that.
It's the presence he has. It's like the calm before the storm. And with the whole scales of it, it's that ideology. I'm trying to think. I mean, so many films have done it, but the whole that, you can't. It's like Minority Report's probably the most perfect example that it is that. Where do the morals come into judging people before a crime has been committed versus judging it after the crime has been committed? And it's such an interesting concept. Again, and with it being ancient Egypt, is based off, tales and whatnot, and obviously the actual ancient mythology. And it's really interesting that he went from Khonshu to Emmett. And I think when you get that revelation that he was the previous avatar for Khonshu, it's really fascinating. And again, it's, as you said, it's how polite he is. It's his mannerisms. even as a villain, when he first meets Stephen, he's not trying to kill him. He's just trying to have conversations with him to get to know him. And I think that's what made it really interesting for me as a viewer, was those smaller moments in which you'd build his persona. And by the time you get to the ending of it, I feel like he's had a complete character arc. And even that great moment of him in the psychiatrist ward at the end when the blood starts coming through his shoes from wearing that glass. It's really interesting seeing his sort of deterioration as the villain as well. And I think you're right. I don't think many actors could have done this role. And I think it's like having a presence, isn't it? You're having a presence as an actor, and you know they're capable of something, but you're never going to see it too much. And I think it's a trickier thing to do than most people would think. And again, when you're going up against Oscar Isaac, you kind of want an actor on his level where, I think those two are quite close. Did a lot of press together. I think they're watching episodes at home with each other as well, where they were talking about. It is a really interesting performance. But kind of going that, I mean, if we want to talk about some of the direction for the series, because we've spoken about Mohamed Diab a lot tonight, and I've said to you before, like, I hadn't seen any of his stuff. I know he has an incredible reputation from a lot of people in the industry, which I sort of really appreciate as well. But that he is Egyptian, and he's took on this primarily, what would you call it? Egyptian. That sounds really first called like an Egyptian themed series, but I'm trying to think. Like, it's more going into representation that you've hired an Egyptian director to do this show that's going to primarily be set in Egypt with ancient Egyptian mythology. I know he's in 4 out of the 6 episodes. I'll try and find the other 2 as well.
So he directed the first 2 episodes, and I want to say, didn't he, or was it?
I think he did. I think he did episodes 1, 3, 5, and 6.
1, 3, 5, and 6. Yeah, and
I mean, episode 5 is the one for me, where it's like the madness. Like episode 5 is the one. And again, Ethan Hawke was speaking, saying it was Mohamed Diab that approached him for this. It wasn't even as a professional meeting. He was literally like approaching him in the street. He'd wanted to do a film with him, and they had the conversations, got him aboard. Now, Mohamed Diab has also been very present on Twitter recently, again, because he's not a big name per se. He's been very open, having discussions with fans, doing interviews with multiple media outlets. He has seemed really interested in this, and he spoke a lot about his approach to the series. And I mentioned sort of skyline stuff. He wanted to show Egypt and some of the cities as real cities, not just pyramids in a sunset, which I can kind of understand. And it's really fair, because I want to kind of make a dig at the Poirot film for Murder, Death on the Nile. He had the most awful orange filter for the entire film for being on the Nile. And it got to a point where it did feel very comedic. And then when you get something like this, which is, somebody that's lived there, saying, it is like a city. And Egypt's a really fascinating one, I think, for the West. Like, without getting political, I guess you can bring sports into it. The culture of Egypt is so not behind, like, its representation in Western media.
Yeah.
Our media represents Egypt as still like pyramids. Pyramids and like, not beggars, but there's never been like modern representation of Egypt.
Yeah.
And I think for me, like, obviously, like, Liverpool have Salah, who's like a god over there. Like, and Arsenal have El Nene, called the Egyptian Pirlo. He what's interesting with them, like, this is really relevant, but kind of in there. You go on their socials. El Nene, who's like a very average Prem player, has like 6 million followers. And it's like, that is the Egyptian supporters following him.
I was going to say, Mo Salah got a lot of votes in the Egyptian election.
Yeah,
like that's how highly regarded kind of their sports, and I feel like sports at the moment is kind of like
they do well in sports.
The window into kind of, especially with football, especially with their run in the African Cup Nations. I know we're talking about football now and not film,
but it's interesting because it's the representation of like an Egyptian player in the Premier League. Yeah, it doesn't happen often, and I think Western culture and it's things like this where we get an insight into the country, and you do get, obviously, you get Muslims over there as well. I mean, both Salah and Al are, but that sort of stuff isn't spoken about in the media because the media's got such negative representations of so many things. But for Moon Knight, I think it was really important because, again, I've not been to Egypt. I haven't really traveled much outside Europe, in truth. But it's one of those kind of countries where you can sense that they're trying to not explore it, but there is much more than pyramids, which shouldn't even be said. But it's the way it's portrayed. I hope that makes sense to people at home.
In the same way that, like, whenever we learn like Egypt in school, it was all pharaohs, and it was the Egyptian gods, and it was
the
mummies and the pyramids and stuff like that. But you only learn about kind of the major Egyptian gods like Osiris and just the ones that were important. You never would have learned about Khonshu or any of the other gods that we saw in this series and stuff like that. So it's not only expanding upon the mythos, but it's also kind of making that relevant and kind of bringing that over to kind of Western culture and stuff like that, and just showing off the various different things that Egypt kind of has to offer. And you do get to see a lot of Egypt as a city outside of the pyramids and stuff like that. I know we still get the pyramids and everything like that, but you see a lot more inside the city. You see a lot more of the culture in this series, which I mean, you can only get if you have an Egyptian director on board who's willing to show people that it's more than what people think. Now, I know if there was any criticism of the series, I would personally put it towards that final episode having two giant Egyptian gods fighting each other. You didn't need to have that to up the stakes for the finale and stuff like that, because honestly, for this finale, the stakes are already raised enough by what happens in episode 5. Like, you don't need to have a giant kind of kaiju battle or a giant light beam or whatever is going on for the MCU for it to work. You just don't need that anymore because the MCU has kind of moved on from that. That's the only criticisms I genuinely would have of the entire series, because I think this series is fantastic. It's intriguing from start to finish. If I was to talk about my favorite moments, I think both of us are going to say favorite episode is probably Asylum, the episode 5. But actually, one of my favorite moments, which if I wasn't going to pick Asylum, because it would be the end of the Asylum episode with Stephen turning into stone and Mark making it to the Field of Reeds as being my favorite moment. But if I was to pick a moment from another episode, I would go back to Ethan Hawke and the character of Arthur Harrow, and the moment where he is talking to the statue of Khonshu, and he basically says, I just want you to know that I owe my victory to you, like, and stuff like that. I think that speech is just so well done and so well acted that really stood out for me.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I'm actually going to go. I mean, episode 5 is my favorite by a country mile.
Yeah,
but favorite moments, I actually really enjoyed so much of episode 1. Now it's a bit unfair if I put the therapy scene of episode 4 because it is setting up 5, but every single character in that scene on that tracking shot has been in the series up to that point. Even the hippo, there are teddy bears, the hippo at the gift shop. There's so many things happening in that one scene. That was just a game changer to me that we had that moment. So that that's unfair because that to me it's still episode 5, but I know it's 10 minutes before it. I loved all of episode 1. Brings you to the characters and just that he has this setup, the lonely man, and it's really traumatic when you get into it more that he's calling his mum who never answers, and the reality is that she's dead and she hated him and despised him. And he's calling his imaginary mother about his imaginary girlfriend, and it is just seeing all of that. Episode 1, I think, absolutely loved. Obviously, they used the song. Oh God, that every day I wake up. Man Without Love, I think it's called.
Yeah.
But episode 1 to me had some of my favorite moments. Probably episode 5, Country Mile, best episode. Then episode 1 for me, and the rest are kind of similar levels. But I just think, oh yes, it's just the finale just let me down a bit. I'm sorry. It's just I understood why they have, God fighting gods makes sense, but I think when the show's done so well up to that point, having them in smaller roles than just getting 2 giant gods fighting didn't really do it for me. Yeah. I'm trying to think of some other moments I actually enjoyed. It's really hard to look past
I enjoyed the stuff about the kind of tomb of Alexander the Great and stuff like that. Yes. I enjoyed that scene of him being shot as well, because you can actually see his personalities change in that scene, which was fantastic. And of course, the moment where Khonshu changes back the stars is really visually satisfying as well, to see kind of the stars going across the night sky and stuff like that. There were some really beautiful moments in this series. I do enjoy it overall. Like, if I'm giving my final thoughts and stuff like that, I do enjoy the series. I will probably watch it again, especially if they're going to move on and do a series 2. Finale is a bit of a letdown just because it's general Marvel and the rest of it is completely fine. But I would say, yeah, that Asylum episode, if he doesn't get nominated for an Emmy, that I have no idea. No idea.
Yeah. I would I'd quite say like I'd like to see this series again. I don't know when because I don't watch much TV, and like rewatching another series is a bit cold for me personally. But I would like to see it again flowing as not watching 6 episodes together, but just doing it over a couple of days rather than 6 weeks of so many things in your life happening in advance. I think it would benefit the show a lot. I'm not going to sit here and say Disney should release all 6 episodes at once. I think the conversation between the binge format release versus the weekly, Disney have absolutely decimated Netflix. That conversation is dead in the water now. HBO Max following Disney, Amazon following Disney now.
We're getting Paramount Plus in the UK now as well, aren't we? I wonder if we'll get the football with that.
Well, I wish we'd get their pundits at least for Champions League, not awful ones here. But yeah, it's interesting on Moon Knight. I think overall I enjoyed it. I think it's very different to what we've had before, which is always the intrigue. And again, like there might be kids now who may have watched the show and start to take up an interest in ancient Egypt mythology. Because listen, as a kid, like learning about like Greek gods was really cool, and I imagine like mythology is quite appealing to a lot of people. So maybe there's other people going and exploring that. But I think overall, I think it's fine. It's a lot better than I expected when it was announced a year ago. And I think it does benefit from having that cast and the directors involved in the series to make it a little bit better. And if there's going to be season 2, Oscar Isaac keeps saying it's not. I think there will. I don't think it will be a case of let's slap bang wallop and get one out next year. I think it could be a couple of years away, but I would expect a season 2. Or if not a season 2, we will get that Midnight Sun series or film or whatever they want to do. I think Moon Knight will return. It's just the capacity of how and when.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm excited for it. I'm excited for it if they go ahead with it. And I think Midnight Suns, I feel like it's going to take a bit of time setting it up and stuff like that. But I'd be really looking forward to it. But yeah, I guess that was our review for Moon Knight.
Yeah, so everybody at home, please comment below your thoughts on Moon Knight. As I said, this is a spoiler discussion. You can get out there. If you think we missed anything, as I said, this is a lot shorter than our Doctor Strange review, but we're both still taking in this series for the first time. So please do comment that. Obviously, said Marvel will return. Miss Marvel will be the next series, which looks more like a teen coming-of-age comedy, which I think low-key could be interesting. I think it's going to have a very different demographic.
That's also going to have, once again, a lot of representation.
Yeah. And that's going to be very important for that one. So, as I said, at least Marvel's doing new things. I guess that's one massive positive. So please do comment. And if you want to know what's coming up on the channel, we're just going to go over some major things. So today is Sunday, the 8th of May. Tomorrow, we have going Reboots from Hell, The Phantom Menace. It is Star Wars month. And that is the recasting series in which we take a classic film and recast it from head to toe. Me, Tayte are joined by Dave for that one. That's a lot of fun. So please do check that out when it goes up tomorrow night, because all the Star Wars stuff is there to build up to Obi-Wan Kenobi coming May the 27th. And if you're a fan of Steven Spielberg, we've got the Steven Spielberg retrospective coming every Tuesday night, 8 p.m. E.T. is this week. That is me and Neil on that one. Next up after that will be Twilight Zone and Indiana Jones. A lot of Spielberg stuff happening on the channel, but please do join us. It's also E.T.'s 40th anniversary, so there's a big discussion in there. And Tate, where can people find us? What is going on?
People can find us everywhere. So go on to Twitter at cinema_savvy, go on to Facebook, just type in Cinema Savvy, you'll find us. And go on to letterboxd.com/cinema savvy. Also go into the link in the description and pick up a t-shirt or a jumper, or there's loads of stuff we sell in there on the TeePublic store, so go and pick up some cozy clothing.
Definitely. So as I said, everybody at home, thank you for joining us on this review for another Marvel discussion. We've had a lot in the past week. We hope you enjoyed it. If you got, as I said, any critique, any feedback, please do comment that. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening, so be sure to follow us, stick around. We really, really appreciate your support. And until the next time, thank you for watching, and we'll see you then.